we're also going to give you guys false narratives, and the false narratives around communicating with the dead and Upahla being demonic. We're looking really at that. All right, so let us tuck into today's talk. So first of all, what is our homework for us to do after this talk? The kind of homework you need to be doing after this talk is, there's not a lot of homework for this talk. It is, who is your spiritual guide and who is your spiritual advocate? That is the take-home message for today. Who is my spiritual guide and who is my spiritual advocate? I'm going to explain that to you, the difference between the two, and how you'll be able to, you need your family tree, and you also need preferably a member of the family who has a bit of a background on the family's history as well. That would also help as well to answer these two questions. So the laws of African spirituality, I just want to, please just take your phone out, take a screen grab, screenshots, whatever the case may be, but really the laws of African spirituality that we have developed have got nothing to do with race, culture, or ethnic group or background, but rather to do with the science of African spirituality. And we look at the science behind it. Hence, they are rational and logical. And what you'll find from these laws is that they actually are similar to those that are found in science, or you'll be able to find a Western science parallel of those laws. And that is to demonstrate the fact that there is rationality and there is logic behind the work that we do at Umsamo Institute. I hope you guys have taken the screenshot. If not, just drop a little comment in the chat box option and I'll go back. What is Upahla? Ukupahla, right, in its simplest form, is a process when you as a physical being, right, make attempts to engage your metaphysical being with other metaphysical beings. So quick English, physical being is what I am at the moment, what you are, inyama, right, the vessel. Metaphysical being is a non-physical entity, i.e. a spirit, noma itongo, noma idlos. Hold on, there's a question here in the chat box option. Let's see. Am I breaking? Okay, hold on. Let me just check the Wi-Fi connection. I shouldn't be breaking though. We should be good. Okay, my Wi-Fi connection is strong. Just please let me know if that, just keep me up to date, please. And just please let me know if that happens again, if I do break, and then I'll just switch from Wi-Fi to data, and that should help quite a bit. Hold on, sorry, I've opened the wrong presentation now. Sorry about that. I just wanted to check my Wi-Fi signal, just make sure it's solid. Okay, Ukupahla, right? Mangipahla mina as a physical being. Okay, cool, perfect. Mangipahla mina as a physical being. Ngikhuluma Umsamo, noma ngikhuluma wherever, where the candles are, mangipahla, right? By me speaking, itongo, which is within me, is speaking, right? I am the voice for idlos lami that's here in me, right? And upahla is to voice what itongo lami desires to get knowledge and insight on. Because remember, itongo lami has left amanye amatongo and is now residing within me. So ukupahla is essentially sending out a signal to amanye amatongo to say, ukuthi, listen, this vessel that I am within right now, ikhala ngalokhu nalokhu 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 nalokhu, right? The vessel that I am within right at the moment, because remember, itongo lakho has a lot more understanding of what you are going on, what is going on in your life, because they are with you in the living realm. Amatongo don't necessarily have a firm understanding of what you're really going on with, what's really going on in your life and what's really troubling you, because they are in the ancestral realm. So what they understand of your life and what you are going through is communicated to or by your metaphysical being. In other words, itongo lakho. That's what people don't understand. That is why it is, excuse me, it is so important to be in connection netongo lakho, because itongo lakho is the one responsible for ensuring that your messages reach amanye amatongo. What is Ukupahla not? Ukupahla is not a form of worship. We do not worship ancestors. No, communicating with ancestors is not worshiping them. Slaughtering Ilwan is not, we're not worshiping ancestors. We worship God, or umdali wethu, umvelinqangi. We worship umvelinqangi. We acknowledge and we appreciate our ancestors because that is who we are. I can't change the fact that I'm the son of Dr. Mkhize no Madu. Their blood runs through my veins. I can't change the fact that I'm the son of a healer. I can't change that because it is in my DNA. So you need to acknowledge that and appreciate that. Okay. However, abadala, right, fall under God. Hence, God or Christianity is what I am. It is not a means of stimulating dreams. There's a big misconception which umuntu knows. Mpahlile 101 times according to what you guys say at Umsamo Institute, but I haven't received any messages, I haven't received any dreams. No, guys. Abadala do not communicate only through dreams. They do not respond to umpahlo wako only using dreams. So the biggest mistake we do as people is we assume that my answer will come in the form of dreams, when in actual fact, your answer can come in the form of imvelo, nature. Your answer can come in the form of what happens in your friend group. Even technology, abadala, especially young people, abadala can give you your answer through technology. You're going to say, Sabong, how can I give you my answer through technology? You can accidentally land up on a video whilst you're on your feed that answers your question, right? I don't know if you guys have ever experienced that moment where there's a burning question that you have, and out of nowhere you happen to listen to a particular video and you're like, that is exactly my situation. Abadala also use technology. And of course, it's not demonic work, but that's a false narrative, which I'm going to speak about in just a moment. So we've given you guys the fallacies, right? We've given you 5 fallacies: the one of spiritual superiority, legitimacy of a child, step parenthood, death, and as well as ancestors causing death. Today, I want to speak about the fallacy, the false narrative of that communicating with the dead is not something that you can do if you're Black and Christian, or we shouldn't be doing it as Black people because the Bible says we shouldn't be communicating or consulting the dead or consulting anyone who speaks to the dead. And I also want to focus on this narrative that, ancestors are demons. Okay. Let me begin with first communicating the false narrative, false narrative rather, that communicating with the dead is inappropriate. And this idea comes from Leviticus in the Bible that forbids communication with those who are no longer living, or consultation with someone who facilitates that particular process of communicating with the dead. Therefore, one cannot be Christian and execute rituals, right? We must understand that Christianity came after indigenous African religion, right? Indigenous African religion accommodates, African culture. Indigenous African religion is also not bound, or it is not based on a text, i.e. the Bible. And because we are not bound, we are therefore at liberty to decide, or therefore itongo letu is at liberty to acquire different sources of spiritual nourishment from other cultures and other religions. So I hope I'm making sense, and I hope I'm clear that Black culture is word of mouth. We are an oral culture, but that's because we do not want to be bound by text. Yes, sinemthetho and izinto that need to be done a certain way, but because we are not bound by text, right? It means if itongolam desires to be Christian, however, there is an element of Judaism that it can benefit from, I can practice, or I can learn, or I can engage in an element of Judaism while still keeping my identity of Christianity. And if Itolam wakes up tomorrow morning and says, I'd like to dabble in Islam, it can do that. Because indigenous African religion is about spirituality, not necessarily a way or a particular doctrine that everyone should subscribe to, which is what Christianity would be. So to say to me, Wuti, it is impossible for when Wuti to slaughter a goat on Friday, have people eat it on Saturday, and go to church on Sunday, what you are missing or you are not understanding is that indigenous African religion says I can do that. Indigenous African religion says Siyabonga can slaughter a goat on Friday, eat it on Saturday, and go to church on Sunday, and then the following Friday, maybe visit the mosque because Unende Etiza that he needs to consult with one of their priests there. That's what African religion says. So that is why I call it a false narrative for us as people in Africa, because we are not bound by text, right? To constrict or restrict, right, yourself from communicating or consulting with Abadala, right? You are limiting your sources of spiritual nourishment. And then finally, ancestors being demons. This one, I used to be upset when people would say it. I used to get very triggered, and I used to get very upset and very angry when people used to say, Siyabonga, but ancestors are demons. And now I don't anymore, because I understand that they don't understand. Ancestors are not demons, right? First and foremost, ancestors are not demons. Ancestors, right, are metaphysical beings who used to be physical beings, but are now simply residing, operating, and functioning in a different realm which runs parallel to ours. So Ugokwam was a physical being living in the living realm. However, now she's a metaphysical being operating within the ancestral realm. I hope that makes sense. If it doesn't, just leave me a comment in the comment section below. But to say that your grandmother who used to feed you, nourish you, and raise you is now a demon, okay, is not necessarily disrespectful to her. It is not necessarily blasphemous. But what it is damaging to your identity. What it is saying is that you are ignoring a fundamental part of Umsamo wako, because remember, Umsamo wako ugogo nomkhulu, uma nobaba, and okhokho bako, your great-grandparents, right? So when you say that my ancestors are demons, what you are actually saying is that what you are saying, or if you say that to worship, or sorry, to engage in that, or to speak to that, or that this thing is demonic, what you are saying is I am a demon. Because if you are a product, how can you, if the very thing that, if the person that is responsible for you being on this earth is a demon, what does that make you? So the highest form of self-hatred is calling your ancestors demons, because you are implying that you yourself are a demon. I hope that makes sense. And last time I checked, there's very few demons, right, that are living. I am not a demon. I know for a fact I'm not a demon. I understand that my grandmother simply went from a living to the living realm, and she's now in the ancestral realm. The concept of death only applies to us in the living realm, but not necessarily to them in the ancestral realm, which I cover in Law 7 when I talk about social constructs. So forget the false narrative that ancestors are demons. And next time someone says to you, no, ancestors are demons, ask them, then what are you? And I want to bring this back because these are two quotes from Professor Olupuna from Harvard. And the only part that I want to highlight, right, is this from here. I hope you can see my cursor where it says the idea. And I want to say here, this is the only part. This is what I was referring to because he's very knowledgeable in African indigenous religion. And when they asked him about the dynamic, this is what he said. The idea is that the traditional African practitioner who constructed the amulet believes in the efficiency or the efficacy of other faiths and religion. Okay, so he's saying that as African indigenous practitioners, we believe in the efficacy of other faiths and other religion. Hence, there is no conflict in his mind between traditional African spirituality and another faith. They are not mutually exclusive. He sees the other faith as complementing and even adding to his spiritual potency, to his own spiritual practice of constructing effective amulets. Indigenous African religions are pragmatic. It's about getting tangible results, because indigenous African religion does not insult another practice. It does not insult or ridicule or defame another religion, but it rather sees it as a potential source of spiritual nourishment. Right, I just want to check this, make sure there's no questions before I move on to our next. Just want to make sure, guys, there's no questions, correct? I hope we understand the false narratives. And if you do have the time, please Google Professor Olupona or Lupona and Harvard Gazette African Indigenous Religion. And it is an amazing and thought-provoking, eye-opening interview on African religion. And if you really want to understand what we are working towards and why we actually are so accommodating at Umsamo Institute of other practices and other religions, then read that. I'll actually drop it here in the chat box option. It's Professor Olu. I hope I'm saying it right. Harvard Gazette on African religion, indigenous African religion. If you can read that, then you'll be well set off. Okay. Number one, this is the biggest reason why people umpahlo abantu fails. Okay, we don't understand that there is a fundamental difference between a spiritual advocate and a spiritual guide. The two are very different, right? And another name for a spiritual advocate, we can call it idlozi ebeliphila noma idlozi eliphilayo, whichever one you want to use. Idlozi ebeliphila noma idlozi eliphilayo is anyone who was, or spiritual is an ancestor who was once living. They raised you, they grew up with you, they lived with you, they know the demands of your life, they know what are your deepest desires, how you think, how you feel, how you exercise your autonomy and your agency. They know who you are in the living realm. They know who you are in the living realm. They know your identity in the living realm, right? Abadala or amatongo in the ancestral realm will be limited in the knowledge that they have of you, because they'll never experience you, right? Because they're not with you in the living realm. Only itongo lako is with you in the living realm, okay? When one makes a plea, you need to know, who is this plea for? Am I pleading to my spiritual advocate, or am I going to plead to my spiritual guide? What is the spiritual guide? A spiritual guide is an ancestor not known to you, but is responsible for helping you navigate the ancestral realm, especially during a lucid dream. So a spiritual guide, right? Okay, or any metaphysical experience, let me say that. Your spiritual guide is the person that is responsible for your safety and ensures that you leave on time and determines how much you see and how much you don't see. So what is the process of things? Okay. Your spiritual guide will get told, this is the message Usiyabonga needs to receive. Then the spiritual guide will say, you know what, okay, this is where I'm going to take him, or this is what I'm going to show him. Then the spiritual guide will determine how much I can see and how much I don't see, okay, to get the message. Because the spiritual guide can decide what you know what, I'm only going to show you 80% because you're not ready for that remaining 20%. Or I'm going to show you 60% but you're not ready for the remaining 40%. Okay, so when one has an incomplete dream, you don't make your plea to your spiritual advocate, because that's not the responsibility of the spiritual advocate. The responsibility of your spiritual advocate is to do exactly that. They spend all days esigodlweni, in court, fighting for you, right? Uthi, no, Usiyabonga is actually going through A, B, C, D. He really needs help with this. Can you please bestow him with this? And can you please help him with this? Can you please help him with that? Or can you please help him with this? The spiritual advocate is no different to an advocate in real life, a legal advocate. They spend all their time, they spend a lot of time in court, and they don't have time to come and show you the message as well, right? But they are the best person to advocate for you because they know you the best out of all of Amatongo A. Your spiritual advocate is the best person because they lived with you, they loved you, they nourished you, okay? They protected you, they saw you grow up, right? Hence, when your plea, or depending on your plea, right? That's why it's so important to know your family tree. Know who exactly you're speaking to in this Ukupahla, because your message needs to be directed at a particular person. Because if it's not directed, or you don't have specificity with umpahlo wako, how can you expect an answer, right? It's no different to sending a group WhatsApp message and expecting a response. But if you send it to that one contact or those two contacts, there's a greater probability of a response because and on top of that, you can personalize the message. So your spiritual advocate is the person fighting for you in court. If you have a job issue or you want a new job, you do not go and phahla kubadala in general. You call upon your spiritual advocate. Gogo, mkhulu, baba, ma, inganyako, and use your nickname. If they give you a little pet name, use it because you want that. You want to evoke that relationship that you had, right? And your spiritual advocate is the one that will go to amanyamatonga our pets, right? And it's Godwin. And then in court, they will advocate for you, which as in, Usiyabonga needs this message. Please, can you show him A, B, C, D so he can get the new job that he wants? Then the spiritual guide will be told by the court, which is Amatongo, as in, show Usiyabonga, this is the message that he needs to receive. Then the spiritual guide will decide, okay, this is what I think is the best way to show him. When you have an incomplete dream or an incoherent dream, you make your plea to your spiritual guide because they are responsible. If a dream doesn't make sense or a dream lacks clarity, you make a cry to your spiritual guide because the person that is packaging your dream is your spiritual guide. The person that's responsible for how you receive the message is your spiritual guide. Spiritual advocate, spiritual guide. Big difference between the two. I hope you guys understand that. So, how does Ukupahla work? Okay. And this is the most important. This is probably this after the spiritual guide and spiritual advocate talk. This is the most important one, right? The actual process. There's quite a few, but this is the. If you understand this, then you will see why umuntu needs to always practice Ukupahla. So on the left-hand side, you can see this is a group of Amatongo. This is where we all come from, right? So our ancestral spirits come from a group of ancestral spirits. And it enters our body, okay? Then the way that we communicate, there's that little, I used the Wi-Fi signal to kind of demonstrate communication. Itongo lethu langaphakathi, our ancestral spirits inside of our body, can communicate with amanyamatongo. But this line of communication, okay, that exchange can only take place between metaphysical being and metaphysical being, right? Physical beings can talk to one another. Metaphysical beings can talk to one another. There's a question here. I just want to check out this question. I'm so lost. When you say you must phahla on spiritual guide or advocate, so you call on your surname. Okay, let me go back to that. Let me go back so I can clarify. Okay. And your spiritual guide and your spiritual advocates are going to come from the same surname, right? Let me use myself in this example. My spiritual advocate, Ukokwam, or Wankolis, my grandmother. She's my spiritual advocate. I don't see her very often, but when I do, it's because she's giving me feedback on her advocacy, right? So the spiritual guide and spiritual advocate will always come from the same family. So uzobiza isibongo sika, so when you phahla ngizobiza bakamkhize khabaza namavoko qabaka hlanje kubhela nini nkhanya masesweni, and then that's the general Mkhizes. But then you need to know your family tree, because I come from umuzi wakalphuzi, which is from the 13th house of the Mkhize, well, the very last, we come from the very last house of the Mkhize clan, right? And then in Biza Bagalphuzi specifically, okay? And then once sengiba bizile bonke, then say, okay, imina ingane yenu usiyabonga. Sengicela ukukhuluma nogogo wami. Gogo, imina. I'll mention my little nickname that I say to her because she gave me a little nickname when she was here. It's imina usibanibani wakho. Gogo, ngiyacela. I'm trying to translate into English for those of you that don't know Zulu. Gogo, I need help with ABCD. It's me. Or maybe I have an incoherent dream, right? I know who my spiritual guide is. Ngibabiza bonke, ngibabiza bakalphuzi specifically, and then I say, ngicela ukukhuluma no sibanibani, the name, and then I call out the name of my spiritual guide. Let's see. Thank you for showing me ABCD. However, I'm not clear on this or that. Please, can you clarify that message for me? So depending on if it's a message-based umpahlo or if it's a advocacy kind of based umpahlo, which one is, there's another, I just want to try to get to you here. I don't know who my spiritual advocate is because my paternal family didn't get along with us. Okay, your spiritual advocate is there someone in your life, right, who you grew up with, who this person has to have, they would have loved you unconditionally, the most raw, passionate form of love, but now they are no longer living. That is what a spiritual advocate is. They have to have, like, to this day, I mean, my parents loved me, but they didn't love me the way my Coco loved us, you know. That is what a spiritual advocate is. I hope that answers your question. If not, just let me know in the chat box option. So ngesikhathi mina ngiphahla, right, whilst I'm speaking, right, I am evoking my spirit, okay? So essentially, think about, how do I put it? You're turning your Wi-Fi on and you're telling itongo lakho ukuthi as in send out signals to amanye amatongo. So ngesikhathi mina ngikhuluma, right, I'm speaking in the living realm. My ancestral spirit is then going to go and communicate to the other metaphysical beings or amanye amadlozi here, okay? And then amadlozi are going to say, okay, fine, uthini usiyabonga. Then the ancestral spirit is going to be like, no, the message is for the spiritual advocate, or the message is for the spiritual guide. Because you can't just come and say, okay, fine, who are you? You're speaking to all of us. No, who's the message for? Messages need to be specific, guys. Messages need to be specific. Nina, do you read group chat? When someone sends you a broadcast on a broadcast list, you don't read them, ne? But if you get a message from Ubabwako specifically, then you're going to read it. But you don't get, most of us don't read group chats because that message is for everybody. But if it's specific, you're going to read it and you're going to respond and engage, okay? So itongo lako is going to take this message to Ihlos, right? And it's going to say, I have a message for the spiritual advocate, Ukupahla Zoom. Then they'll speak to Ukupahla Zoom. Ukupahla Zoom is going to speak to it. It's like, okay, uthini usiyabonga, ukhala ngani usiyabonga, usiyabonga ukhala ngalokhu nalokhu nalokhu. He's like, hey, you know what? I know usiyabonga ngiyakhumbula ngesikhathi ngihlala naye, he did complain about ABCD. Let me go fight for him in court. Ahambe. She goes fight for me in court. Then what happens is that after the advocacy work, Abadala will say, okay, fine, we're giving that to Usiyabonga. No, Usiyabonga is not getting it to him. We're not giving it to him. These are the reasons why. Spiritual guide, prepare the message for him. Then what will happen is the message is communicated. Now listen to this part. The message is not communicated to wena Siyabonga as a vessel. The message is communicated to itongo lako. And then and because itongo lako is here and within you, then you have a dream and you see it, if that's how they decide to respond to your message or your umpahlo wako. So umbono, or a dream, is a spiritual encounter or experience. It is through the lens of itongo lako that you are seeing the world as Amatongo would like you to see it. There's a question here. I just want to get to it. Okay, I think, so what happens if you don't have anyone who has passed on close to you? I think my grandfather, he didn't have a problem with my mother marrying into the family, but he died before I was born. Okay, guys, so sometimes your spiritual advocate may have loved you unconditionally, but they may have passed away. Like I know, like one of my clients now that I'm working with, her spiritual advocate only knew her for 2 years or 3 years, and her spiritual advocate passed away when she was very young. I think she was 3 or 4. So she doesn't really remember them, but she knows that that this person gave her unconditional love. And even Yeskate Pasha, and she calls on her specifically, she literally feels the warmth and the love within her body because when she speaks to her spiritual advocate. So they don't necessarily, guys, there's someone dropping a question in the question and answer box. Please can use the chat box option. Please can just copy paste it across. So she knows and she can feel the love and the warmth. So don't look at necessarily someone who grew up with you or someone who was close to you, someone who raised you. That person may have only known you in the first 2 years of your life, first 3 years of your life. That's why I'm saying speak to people in your family who was around you a lot of the time when you were born. For most of us, it's going to be a grandfather, a grandmother, a parent, an aunt, or an uncle. All right, because it's very important to know who your spiritual advocate is, because knowing who your spiritual advocate is will also determine who do you thank when their advocacy yields in blessings. Because when the advocacy yields in blessings and manifestations in the living realm, when for them here and to say thank you, you know exactly who to thank. That's why spiritual advocates are very important. Before I move on, guys, are we clear on that? I just want to say the last 20 minutes for the actual process part because that is quite lengthy. Are we all clear on the spiritual advocate, spiritual guide part? Are we all clear on that? We all just want to make sure. There's a question here, guys. Yeah, sorry guys, I just had to check my Wi-Fi and make sure that we're having a bit of a technical issue on my side. So I hope we're all clear on the spiritual advocates, spiritual guide part. I just want to make sure that that question has been copy pasted across. What happens if you, speak to your family, speak to your mother, speak to your father, speak to anyone who was there with you, because chances are, if you don't know anyone right now, they may have been around when you were very young, when you were just born. So try to speak to your family about who your spiritual advocate was, who really loved you unconditionally when you were younger but is no longer around. Because like I said, that person, guys, I can tell you right now, the key to releasing the power of umpahlo, guys, when you change the narrative of sengicela nina bakamkhize ukuthi ngicela ningisize ngalokhu nina bakamkhize ninogcwabo okubhela to kokwami umzukulu wakho usibanibani, right? Oh, shucks. I'm so sorry to hear that your mom got hijacked. That's fine. Don't worry. This is going to be recorded. And then the team will distribute the actual list. They take all the lists of people that are registered and they distribute the link to the recording. Don't worry. Please go attend to your mother. Please attend to your mother. So okay. For umpahlo, guys, is your spiritual advocate. If you need something, guys, when you're asking for a special favor, plead to your spiritual advocate, and you must make that message as personal as possible. That means the pet names, the little jokes that you guys used to share, especially the inside jokes, right? People think there's this misconception that umpahlo must be this serious, intense, and deeply emotional or deeply intense process and it must be serious. No, umpahlo must be heartfelt and it must be warm. If you do not feel warm and fuzzy and content and almost cathartic after umpahlo, then you're not doing it properly. Because umpahlo should come from here. So when you speak to your spiritual advocate, speak to them as if they were here and still living, right? Because you're no longer just speaking to Aba Amatonga again, but you're speaking to your person that loved you. There's a question here. Does this have to do with being born in or out of wedlock? Because I have a spiritual connection with my great-grandmother from my maternal side, but my parents got married after I was born. I mean, excuse me, the spiritual advocate. Stembile, you need to let me know, do you see your grandmother in your dreams? That's what I need to know. Do you see your grandmother from your maternal grandmother in your dreams? Okay, now let's get to the actual process of Ukupahla, guys. The nitty-gritties of Ukupahla. And I want to spend, I saved the last 15, 20 minutes or so